unfortunate for me, the doctor decided to break my waters without telling me. That was horrible. It's a very, I don't do that as a midwife. Like, why are you breaking the water? And anyway, yeah, it made sense because immediately he broke the water, I went into labor. But why are you not telling me that you're going to break my water? At least make me comfortable. My name is Lucy Muthoni, and this is my bun in the oven story. My first child was an awaited pregnancy. I struggled with, I think it was polycystic ovarian syndrome, which was not really diagnosed on time. But since I was a young girl, I knew I was different because my periods were not as regular as everybody else. I was those girls who carried pads at the beginning of the term, and the last week to closing school, I'm like, want some pads, and I would distribute them. But when I go home, then I'd have my periods. And when I was in Form 3, the nurse who was in our school mentioned to me, because every time, so we would be checked. There was this funny thing in high school where they would check if you're pregnant when you come back, and then after half term, they'd check again. So she noticed a pattern that every time she checked when we were opening, I had my periods at home. But then after midterm, I've not had my periods. And she's like, you lied about your. So eventually, I think when I was in Form 3, she was like, you have some hormonal imbalance. And I was like, what is that? And I ignored her because she was quite the woman. When I now became a nurse is when I understood what this hormonal imbalance is. And I was like, okay, so what does hormonal imbalance mean? Hormonal imbalance would mean your hormones are not stable enough, and that could delay pregnancy. So even by the time I was getting into marriage, I knew that I might struggle to get a baby, or I may never get a baby. So of course I did lots of investigations, realized what it was, and I kind of decided not to go on treatment for it because I was like, what if the treatment complicates everything? So I just ate well, kept healthy, and trusted God to help me, get a baby once. So honestly speaking, I did not know I was pregnant until I was 16 weeks. And yes, I'm a nurse midwife. But the pregnancy didn't have any symptoms, honestly. Like, I felt the breast changes, but that used to happen. Like, it's part of a lot of women's cycle. And as much as I would miss my periods, that was normal for me to go even for 3-4 months without periods. So I didn't know. But then I started having this heartburn that was just so crazy. And I remember telling a doctor I used to work with, I think I'm getting a stomach issue. I have something wrong with my digestive system and I need some investigations. And she looked at me, she asked me why. So I described what I'm feeling when I'm feeling it. And she was like, could you be pregnant? I was like, I don't know. Have you missed your periods? I'm like, my story is no periods for a while. So she's like, just do a pregnancy test. It might just be that you're pregnant, because the hormones do that to you, and you're not eating right. Because, we were working and we could get busy. I would miss meals. And I did, and I was pregnant, and I was very surprised. And the next day when I went now to start my clinic, no one was believing. They were like, but how did you not feel that your uterus is growing? And I was like, I did feel that, but I didn't attach it to pregnancy because there was nothing else. So it was a very pleasant surprise, because I had been trying to get pregnant for about 2.5 years. So anyway, the pregnancy was good. Realizing you're pregnant at 16 weeks means you've passed all the hard times, and you're already in your honeymoon of pregnancy. So I really enjoyed it, continued working. The only drop side was, where I used to work then, we would be forced to take leave before the baby comes. So that last stretch was very, very boring for me, but I nested, took care of myself, took care of preparing for the baby, and it was all good. But then my blood pressure started becoming crazy when I was at around week 37. And the doctor said, well, this could be hormonal, just observe it, it will go. But in the case that it continues to go up in another week, you check it at home. If it continues to go up, then you need to have, the baby, we need to give you treatment and then be induced by the time you get to your due date. So, of course, the blood pressure wasn't settling. I went back for my 38th week clinic, and I had to be given some tablets to drop the blood pressure. And I was told if the baby doesn't come by the due date, I need to go and have the baby delivered, so be induced. So yeah, carried on. Of course, this little one didn't come. It was my first baby. First babies always want to stay in longer. So due date was 29th of November. So I checked into hospital. They did the necessary admissions. I was given a pessary. Usually they give you a pessary to kind of start the labor. And by then I didn't even have any signs that I was close to even responding to anything. So they gave it to me, and then after about 5 hours came, checked, and they said, oh yeah, you've had good progress, but I didn't have any labor pain then. So yeah, they after 4 or 5 hours, they inserted a second one, and an hour after that, I started to respond to it, and my contractions started like almost immediately, and it was quite quick because I had contractions start, and within an hour they were regular, and within another hour my water broke, and within another hour I was ready to push the baby out. So it was quite a fast labor, and the delivery was also quite good because luckily the boy didn't take very long to be pushed out. So that was actually quite the easy one. And thankfully, immediately after, the blood pressure settled. And honestly, it's during the recovery phase that I realized I had a lot more experience in being a mom than I thought I had because of my midwifery background. And that's actually part of where my thoughts around becoming an out-of-hospital midwife started. But I took care of the little one, and he had no trouble. He breastfed well. He grew quite nice, big and chubby. And yeah, that was all good. Because this first pregnancy took long to come in, I didn't even use birth control after he was born. I was like, it's okay, let me just leave myself, get pregnant whenever I can get pregnant. And if I count back, I think when it was 1.5 years, that's when I got pregnant with my second one. Again, at least this time I discovered earlier, but it was 10 weeks. Because my periods hadn't really come back, so I had carried her for 10 weeks without realizing, but then I realized, I think the second time I had a few signs, so even by the time I was doing the tests, at least I knew, there's a hint that I could be pregnant. The pregnancy was also quite good. In fact, that one I enjoyed it completely. It was, I think, I would say it was the easiest pregnancy as far as managing me goes. I I know people say that probably, you know, there are all these myths that, okay, maybe it's because she was a girl, maybe that's why it was easy. But it was actually quite easy. I was engaged at work. I think that also contributed a lot to the easiness, because I really didn't stop to think about the pregnancy. And then, of course, it was my second one. The second pregnancy, you're always like easing into it and not really concerned. And that went quite well. Of course, there was the whole blood pressure issue that I had with the first one, and I was required to watch that it doesn't go, you know, off the trajectory, and I was so on top of that. So I went to work one morning, and I had a clinic appointment that day, but I was having contractions, but from a very, you know, like from very far, so I could just tell I'm in early labor. And went in for clinic. The doctor checked me, my blood pressure was up, but then yes, I was having contractions, and the doctor was like, let's just see how this goes. If you don't go into full on labor overnight, then you can come tomorrow morning and we'll just, you know, induce you again. I didn't want to have induction. So anyway, I continued with work. That day went home. I still had a bit of cramp-like pains with some contractions on and off. Slept. Nothing really disturbed me until 6 in the morning, when I felt, okay, I think I could be in proper labor, but let me just go in and be checked, since we had agreed with the doctor not to wait too long. So when I went in and, you know, they checked, they realized, oh, my cervix was actually open and it was ready. It's just that I didn't have the contractions. So, and unfortunate for me, the doctor decided to break my waters without telling me. That was horrible. It's a very, I don't do that as a midwife. Like, why are you breaking the water? And anyway, yeah, it made sense, because immediately he broke the water, I went into labor. But why are you not telling me that you're going to break my water? At least make me comfortable. So anyway, that was horrible. Like, I was in agony for like 20 minutes after it was done. But I had contractions that started, and again, just like the first one, it went very quickly. In like 3.5 hours, the baby was born. But then this one, as much as it was an easy pregnancy, after was a bit dramatic. First, my placenta refused to come out, which is typical when you have like a baby come very quickly. If you have a very speedy labor, it is expected that one of the things that will happen is the uterus could stop and not remove the placenta. Of course, that I knew, having a midwifery background, but then I had to go into the operating room. They sedate you and remove the placenta manually. So of course I didn't get to bond with my baby immediately, but came back, and I was awake and I breastfed her and she was okay. And we actually just stayed in hospital for like another day and went home. Now I was discharged home, and I got home like at around 1 p.m., had lunch, and decided to go and sleep. But then when I went to sleep, I realized that I have a headache. So my first thought is my blood pressure gone crazy? So I checked my blood pressure. It was high, but not so bad. So I decided to take some medicine to kill the headache. But I realized each time I'm awake, I'm okay. But if I sit, the headache starts. If I lie down, the headache is worse. It's like someone has a hammer inside my head and they're just pounding. That was very scary. So I stayed on the night just like that. I remember at some point in the night, I was actually like sitting, and because I couldn't sleep lying down because of the headache. But then I was like, no, this is not normal. And the problem of being a medic is you just know what is wrong with you. So I just told my then husband to take me to hospital. Just let's go to hospital. This is not normal. This headache is just weird. And we went back to hospital. we were there in the middle of the night, and they asked for a scan. They did a scan. I was in and out of it. Like, this headache was so bad, I kind of kept feeling like I'm losing consciousness. And the scan eventually showed that there is something happening there. It wasn't clear. And the doctor said, well, it doesn't look like there's anything major, but why don't we try to sedate you a bit and see if it's just stress from the birth. And I was sedated, and the next day I felt well and then was discharged. But it's like every time I went back home, this headache would just come back. So when I went back the second time, the doctor was like, okay, let's just do an MRI of the head to check what is going on. And luckily, the MRI showed that I had actually bled. So it's interesting that during the labor process, something happened, but eventually we got to know. I'll get to that place, but something happened during the labor process, and I ruptured a little vessel in my brain, and so I had a bleed in my brain, and that's the reason why I was having this headache. So they had to find out, where is this bleeding coming from? Like, why did you bleed? But then there was a history of high blood pressure in the last stages of pregnancy, and so luckily the bleeding had stopped, and I didn't need to go in for surgery to like have it drained or anything, but I was given steroids to help drain it and all. So my postnatal period with this second baby was, it's called the moon phase, where your face becomes all round because of the steroids, and I was on lots of concussions of medicine, but at least I recovered well from that. And though I had to stay in hospital for like 10 days, and I was distanced from my baby because they couldn't keep the baby in hospital with me. She did very well. I would express milk and send it home, and she'd be fed by my family and friends. And I remember when I left, because it got too bad. I'm rushing the story, but it got too bad that at some point I had to be in ICU because I completely blacked out and was unconscious, and they were monitoring and trying to manage me, and that's why the baby went home. And I was pumping. They were pumping because I lost like 2-3 days of that, and sending the milk home. But then when I recovered and went to the ward, I remember that whole being united with her, and she latched on like she had never been away, and how happy I was. And I went home, and it all went very well. But that was quite a complex sort of situation. So yeah, she grew up, and follow-up care was of course intense because I had to make sure that the bleeding goes. I had to do other MRIs, and I recovered fully on. By 6 weeks, you could never even tell there was a bleed. It had all drained out and cleared, and my blood pressure was back to normal. But of course, the question was left for what really is going on. But I remember the doctor telling me, the best you can do for yourself is just don't try to have another baby. This is the end. Okay. And I was like, yeah, this is the end. I always wanted 3 children. But because of this scenario, the doctor was like, hey, and I was in agreement, like, okay, yeah, we are not having another baby, that is it. And I continued my life because I'm fully recovered and everything is okay. Then when she was 3, I was like, okay, I need to really close this chapter of having babies properly. So it was a debate between myself having the permanent sterilization, or the father having the permanent sterilization. And of course, in that whole trying to convince each other, I got pregnant. That was scary. That was very scary. Like, I completely understand those women who get pregnant when they don't want the baby, and the emotions they go through. Because my first thought was, I have just, put myself in the journey where I could die and leave my 2 children. And this one, because of the history, and I was so stressed out. But there's a baby, there's a bun in the oven. I have to carry them. They're precious, you know. So I took all the measures I could to just make sure that my blood pressure remains okay through the pregnancy. And it did. But I remember going for my 30-week appointment, and, you know, I had researched, I was still on follow-up with the doctors. We had never really been able to tell what's going on because everything seemed okay. And I remember that appointment, the doctor told me, you know, I don't know if we need to take a risk with you carrying this pregnancy to the end. How about we try and get the baby out by 36 weeks? And I was like, yes, I'm very ready for that, because everything up to 37 weeks, I'm fine. It's just that 38th week when the blood pressure goes up and everything. And I was like, yes, by 36 weeks, this baby is out. But he was like, okay, now what we need to do is monitor your blood pressure from now, just to make sure, because from what we had studied, they were going with the theory of a certain syndrome that women get in pregnancy, that the hormones shoot your blood pressure towards the end of it. And that's what we were working with. And our studies had showed that the first 2 births are okay, but from the 3rd birth, there's potential for the blood pressure starting to hike up earlier than later. So that's the reason why we had to monitor this blood pressure as early as week 30. And I was faithful in monitoring it. And he was like, the day you notice it's up, just come and we will induce you or remove this baby. And I was like, that's okay. So all was well. The baby was expected to come in February. But I remember this conversation was happening just before Christmas. And with all the hype for Christmas and everything, of course I was still within Nairobi, because I was like, anything could happen. So monitored the blood pressure. But I remember just on 31st, I woke up in the morning and my face was puffy. It hadn't been like that the day before. And I was like, oh, this is not a good sign. So I checked my blood pressure. My blood pressure was borderline, not high, but borderline. And I called the doctor, and the doctor was like, you know what, just try take the tablets every so often to try and keep it on the down low, and let's see what happens in a week. So of course it's fast. There's hype of New Year's. I can't see him. So I went on the 3rd. Everything seemed okay. And he just said, keep an eye. In the case it goes up, we just evacuate this baby. But now on the 8th morning, I would say morning, but it was in the middle of the night, like at around 2 a.m. I just woke up because I had a sharp pain in my head. It was so bad, it woke me up. And the minute I woke up, I had another one like it. Very sharp 2-second pain. And after the second one, I lost power to my whole left side. Like I couldn't move my hand. I couldn't move my leg. They were all gone. And I remember waking up my husband to tell him, okay, wake up, look at my face. Do I have a stroke? Because I can't move my left side. And I've had these 2 sharp pains in my head. And of course, when he woke up, my face was fine, but I couldn't move my left side. And off we were to the hospital to check. And you know, I had at some point told the doctor, you know, if everything goes well, I don't even mind trying to have this baby at home. And of course, he was like, you're crazy. You cannot have a baby at home, yet you have high blood pressure issues at the end. But I was very determined to, you know, have everything stay normal and experience a home birth, because then I was just starting out as an out-of-hospital midwife. But of course, going to hospital, night's an emergency. My blood pressure was high. They did an MRI and found, yes, I have another bleed. And it was going have the C-section and have this baby removed. And the baby was removed premature at 32 weeks, but he was okay. And he was breathing well. He was actually fine, was even good weight. And again, I'm off to ICU for another week of observation. But this time, interesting enough, my body recovered way faster than the second time. And the doctors were like, okay, now we need to get to the root of this. Like, what really is causing this drama? And they eventually did a test that showed them that I have a vessel in my brain that never grew from the baby size. So, you know, blood vessels branch out like trees. So the pressure on this one is so much because it's baby size that it keeps bursting each time the hormones surge in and my pressure naturally goes up. So that's why I end up with high blood pressure because of that little vessel. Yet, as little as it is, it's at a very delicate place on the right side of my brain. And that's the reason why I was having the bleeds. So I was happy that I eventually got to know why this drama was unfolding. And I got to learn what to do with the rest of my life to just avoid having such dramas. One is not get pregnant. So, of course, when they went in to do a C-section, I remember joking with the doctor and saying, I don't ever want to go through this. When I wake up from this C-section, I want to see a baby and a uterus. And he was like, okay, don't be so dramatic, but we'll do the needful, like probably just, you know, sort you out so that you don't go through this again. And I was like, yes, by all means. So of course I know one is not get pregnant, but then is, you know, is to learn that, you know, there's a fault in your body that needs to be taken care of later in life. And so I really try as much as I can to be on top of my wellness and, you know, take care of myself. The interesting thing is that I never had any cravings at all. I don't even ever remember in any of my pregnancies having cravings. All I know is that I really used to want to eat vegetables, like till today. And I think that's a habit I really enforced in all my pregnancies. I always find it difficult to have a meal with no vegetables. But then I know there are things I didn't really like with my first pregnancy, sugar went out of the plan. Like, I stopped taking sugar. I just could not stand sugar, and I could not stand sweet things. So like cakes and all, the only sweet thing to date I can tolerate is chocolate, but I can't take sugar in my tea, so sugar just completely went. I remember with my second one, I had such issues with pasta, yet I really loved pasta dishes, but I couldn't eat pasta dishes. My third one, I was very fine. I never had, like, there was no change at all with all. But then I knew, I guess it's also because of my background, I knew that I needed to eat healthy to grow the baby. And especially now with my third one, because I knew he might come early, I really worked well on feeding myself so that he can get the right nutrients, so that in case he's born early, he's still able to function well. And I'm glad that happened. I find it very important, and even just thinking about my practice and as a midwife, I always encourage women to go for clinic and do all their blood tests and do all the scans that are necessary, because a lot of things can be picked on time, especially if we talk about the things that go wrong, And when they're picked on time, you get prompt treatment. It's easy to save the mom and the baby. Now, truth be told, 9 out of 10 times pregnancies and births go well. But then you'd have situations like mine where it's going well, but there's this one little thing that is not working right. So I find that just being regular with your clinics and even just collaborating with the doctor, maybe it was easier for me to collaborate with the doctor because we had, a similar language being in the medical field, both of us. But the truth is most doctors, most midwives will take time to explain to you what's going on if it's not going right. So just don't brush it off. Even in your clinic appointments, it would be really good to have that, like what really is going on. And that's what I like to even say, like even when I'm working, you're the one carrying the baby, you're the one with the body. So knowing what is going on actually helps you manage yourself and manage the baby better. So clinic appointments, a must. And that was my bun, or is it buns, in the oven story.